Life has a way of changing in an instant. For Sarah Hamilton, billionaire CEO of New Horizons Technologies, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. A delivery truck with failed brakes careened down Madison Avenue, headed straight for her. In those terrifying seconds, a stranger appeared, a man in worn work boots and faded jeans, walking his young daughter home from school. Without hesitation, he lunged forward, pulling Sarah to safety as the truck roared past. He disappeared before she could even thank him, leaving only scraped palms and a daughter's proud smile as proof he existed. But how could a simple act of courage bridge two worlds that were never meant to meet? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm chirped at 5:30, same as every morning. But Michael Connor was already awake. He lay still for a moment, listening to the gentle patter of early autumn rain against the window of their modest Queens apartment. His daughter's latest artwork, scotch-taped to the wall beside his bed, caught his eye. A crayon masterpiece showing him in what looked like a cape, the words, "My Dad the Hero," scrawled across the top in careful 8-year-old handwriting. The shiatsu floor creaked beneath his feet as he made his way to the kitchen, expertly avoiding the spots that might wake Lucy. Their apartment wasn't much, but he'd learned to navigate its quirks like an old friend. Morning light crept through the small window above the sink, illuminating dishes from last night's spaghetti dinner, Lucy's favorite, though they'd had to skip the meatballs this week. The end of the month always required some creative budgeting. Michael started the coffee maker, a weathered hand-me-down from his sister, and began pulling together Lucy's lunch. Peanut butter and honey sandwich, cut diagonally, just the way she liked it. An apple, though he noticed with a frown they were running low on fruit. He'd have to stretch his next paycheck a little further somehow. "Daddy!" Lucy's voice, still, heavy with sleep, made him turn. She stood in the doorway, brown hair wild from sleep, clutching her worn stuffed elephant. "Can I help with breakfast?" His heart squeezed the way it always did when she looked at him like that. Like he was somehow both hero and safe harbor all at once. "Sure can, sweet pea. Want to be in charge of the toast." They moved around each other in their morning dance, Lucy carefully monitoring the toaster while Michael scrambled eggs. These quiet moments were his favorite, just the two of them in their little kitchen, the rest of the world still waking up outside. "Dad," Lucy spoke through a mouthful of eggs, "Jenny's having a birthday party next weekend. Her mum said I can come." She pushed the invitation across the table, a bright pink paper that made Michael's stomach tighten. Birthday parties meant presents, and presents weren't in the budget this month. "We'll see, honey. Let me check the schedule, okay?" He tried to keep his voice light, hating the way her shoulders slumped slightly. Single parenthood was a constant balance between what he wanted to give her and what he could actually manage. After breakfast, they fell into their usual routine. Lucy dressed herself, mismatched socks and all, while Michael packed her backpack and his work bag. Construction site managers needed to be on site early, which meant Lucy would spend an hour in before school care. Another expense that ate into their budget, but there wasn't much choice. "Did you finish your math homework?" he asked, helping her with her raincoat. "Mostly." Lucy twisted her mouth to the side. "The fractions are hard. We'll look at it together tonight, okay? Maybe we can make it fun with pizza slices." The suggestion earned him a giggle, and he felt that familiar surge of gratitude. Despite everything, the tight budget, the long hours, the constant worry, they had this. They had each other. The rain had settled into a fine mist as they made their way down the street. Lucy splashed in every puddle she could find, her yellow rain boots adding spots of brightness to the grey morning. Michael adjusted his grip on his worn umbrella, making sure it covered her more than him. "Look, Dad." Lucy pointed to a construction site they passed every morning. "They're building it so tall." "Sure are." Michael smiled, recognizing the telltale signs of union work, good benefits, better pay, the kind of job he'd been trying to land for months. His current position paid the bills mostly, but without much room for extras. like birthday presents or emergency savings. They reached the school just as other parents were arriving, luxury SUVs and hybrid cars pulling up to the curb. Michael felt the familiar pang of being the odd one out, his work boots and weathered jacket a stark contrast to the business suits and designer bags. But Lucy didn't seem to notice or care, giving him a fierce hug before racing off to join her friends. "Love you, Dad," she called over her shoulder. "Love you too, sweet pea," he replied, watching until she disappeared through the double doors. Then he turned toward the subway station, adjusting his tool belt in his bag. Another day of work awaited, another day of trying to build something solid for his daughter's future, one careful step at a time. Sarah Hamilton stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse office, watching Manhattan sparkle 40 stories below. Dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, but she'd been here for hours already. Sleep was a luxury she'd learned to minimize years ago, back when she was transforming New Horizons from a struggling startup into a tech empire. The Forbes magazine on her desk caught her eye. Her own image staring back at her, carefully composed in a steel-grey suit. "The woman who revolutionized AI," the headline declared. She resisted the urge to turn it face down. The media loved crafting narratives about her, the ice queen of tech, the woman who'd never married, the brilliant but ruthless CEO. Sometimes she wondered if any of them had ever bothered to look past the headlines. "Ms. Hamilton," her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board members are gathering for the 8 o'clock meeting." "Thank you, James." She straightened her silk blouse, checking her reflection in the window. Perfect posture, not a hair out of place. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "If they're going to stare anyway, give them something worth looking at." The boardroom fell silent as she entered. 12 men and 2 women watching her cross to the head of the table. The smell of expensive cologne and coffee filled the air, along with something else. Tension. She'd learned to sense it years ago, like a shark detecting blood in the water. "Good morning," she began, sliding into her chair. "I trust everyone's had time to review the quarterly projections." Marcus Chen, her chief financial officer, cleared his throat. "Sarah, we need to discuss the AI ethics initiative." And there it was, her pet project, the one she'd been pushing for months. A comprehensive framework for ethical artificial intelligence development, complete with a foundation to oversee implementation. The board saw it as an unnecessary expense. She saw it as their responsibility. "The projections show we can easily absorb the initial investment," she countered, pulling up the relevant figures on the room's main screen. "And the long-term benefits..." "The long-term benefits are speculative at best," interrupted Richard Walsh, one of the original investors. His tone carried that particular note of condescension she'd grown familiar with over the years. "Our shareholders expect growth, not philosophical experiments." Sarah maintained her calm expression, though her fingers tightened imperceptibly around her tablet. "Ethical AI isn't philosophy, Richard. It's the future. And I'd rather not explain to our shareholders why we lost market share, because we failed to get ahead of inevitable regulation." The discussion continued, voices rising and falling like waves against rocks. She'd won harder battles than this. Built this company despite everyone who said a woman couldn't succeed in tech without compromising either her principles or her humanity. She'd proved them wrong on the first count, though sometimes, in moments of late-night honesty, she wondered about the second. Hours later, back in her office, Sarah reviewed the meeting notes. She'd won the vote, barely. The ethics initiative would proceed, though with a smaller initial budget than she'd hoped. Another victory, another compromise. "James," she called through the intercom, "push my lunch meeting back 30 minutes. I need to review the Morrison contract." "You haven't had lunch yet?" Her assistant's concern was evident even through the speaker. "It's almost 3. Sarah glanced at her watch, surprised. Time had a way of slipping past her here, in this glass and steel tower she'd built. When was the last time she'd eaten a meal that wasn't accompanied by contracts or reports? When was the last time she'd eaten with someone who wasn't trying to sell her something or get her to sign something? The city stretched out before her, millions of lives intersecting in countless ways. Sometimes she wondered what it would be like to be part of that tapestry instead of watching it from above, to have someone waiting at home, asking about her day, to have a reason to leave the office before the cleaning crew arrived. But she hadn't built an empire by indulging in what-ifs. She turned back to her desk, to the contracts and decisions that awaited her attention. This was the life she'd chosen, the life she'd fought for. If it felt empty sometimes, well, that was the price of success, wasn't it? Her phone buzzed with another meeting reminder. Sarah straightened her shoulders and stood, armor back in place. There would be time for reflection. Later, right now, there was work to be done. Michael's boots were caked with mud by mid-afternoon. The construction site, a maze of puddles after the morning's rain. He'd spent most of the day troubleshooting problems with the foundation pour, the kind of issues that could blow both schedule and budget if not caught early. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from Lucy's teacher that made his heart sink. Mr. Connor, reminder that permission slips and payment for the Natural History Museum field trip are due Friday. Lucy seems very excited about the dinosaur exhibit. Another expense. He'd been juggling bills like a street performer, trying to keep everything in the air. The field trip would cost $40, nearly half of what he had left for groceries this week. But the thought of Lucy watching her classmates go while she stayed behind. Connor, his supervisor's voice cut through his thoughts. Need you to check the rebar on the east side. Something's not matching the specs. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of measurements and calculations, his mind half on the work and half on his daughter. By the time he checked his watch again, he realized he was running late for school pickup. He quickly gathered his things, nodding goodbye to his co-workers as he rushed toward the subway station. Across town, Sarah Hamilton was wrapping up her fourth meeting of the day. The ethics initiative had dominated most discussions, but she'd finally secured the last signature needed for implementation. She gathered her papers, declining her assistant's offer to call her car service. Sometimes she needed to walk, to feel like part of the city, rather than just someone looking down on it. At least take an umbrella, James insisted, holding out a sleek black one. They're predicting more rain. She accepted it with a small smile, one of the few genuine ones she'd given all day. The air outside was heavy with approaching storms, the kind of afternoon where the city seemed to hold its breath. Sarah checked her phone as she walked, responding to emails with one hand, her heels clicking against the wet sidewalk. Meanwhile, Michael jogged up the school steps, finding Lucy waiting with her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez. The girl's face lit up when she saw him, but her teacher's expression was concerned. Mr. Connor, could we chat for a moment? Ms. Rodriguez gestured to the side while Lucy gathered her things. Lucy's been doing wonderfully in class, but I noticed she hasn't been participating in art club lately. Michael's throat tightened. The art club fees had been another casualty of their tight budget. We're taking a break, he managed, trying some different activities. Miss Rodriguez's kind eyes saw too much. We do have scholarship options. Lucy, honey, ready to go? He called, cutting off the conversation. His daughter bounced over, proudly holding up a paper. Look what I drew in class today. It was another picture of him, this time in what looked like a construction worker's outfit, with a cape added. Ms. Rodriguez says I'm getting better at perspectives. It's beautiful, sweet pea. He tucked it carefully into his bag. We better hurry if we want to beat the rain. They were halfway home when the first drops began to fall. Michael shifted, their shared umbrella to cover Lucy better, his own shoulder getting damp. They took their usual route down Madison Avenue, Lucy chattering about her day when the sound of screeching tires cut through the afternoon air. Michael saw it before he fully processed what was happening. A delivery truck careening down the street, its horn blaring. The driver was frantically pumping the brakes, but the wet roads offered no grip. And there, stepping off the curb, was a woman in a business suit, her attention on her phone. Time seemed to slow. Later, he wouldn't be able to explain exactly what he'd been thinking. There was no thought, really, just action. He pushed Lucy safely back onto the sidewalk and lunged forward, wrapping his arms around the stranger's waist and pulling her. Back just as the truck roared past, close enough that he felt the wind of its passage. They tumbled backward, his body taking the brunt of the fall. The woman, dark hair, expensive perfume, lay partially across him, both of them breathing hard. His palms stung where they'd scraped against the concrete. "Dad," Lucy's voice was high with worry. "Dad, are you okay?" He sat up carefully, helping the woman do the same. She turned to face him, her expression a mix of shock and something else, something that made him suddenly very aware of his muddy work clothes and rough appearance. "Aggie, thank you," she began. But he was already standing, checking himself for injuries. A crowd was starting to gather, phones appearing to record the scene. "Come on, Lucy," he said, reaching for his daughter's hand. "We need to get home." "But sir, wait!" The woman called after him, but he was already moving, guiding Lucy through the growing crowd. He could hear sirens in the distance, and the last thing he needed was to be delayed by police reports and questioning. Lucy had homework to finish, and he had to figure out dinner. It wasn't until they were nearly home that Lucy spoke again. "Dad, you really are a superhero, aren't you?" He looked down at her earnest face, managing a smile despite his throbbing palms. "No, sweet pea, just someone who was in the right place at the right time." Behind them, Sarah Hamilton stood on the wet sidewalk, watching their retreating figures until they disappeared into the crowd, while her security team arrived too late to do anything but take statements from witnesses. Her hands were shaking, though not from fear. For the first time in years, something had cracked through her carefully maintained walls. The simple, selfless act of a stranger who hadn't even stayed long enough to be thanked. Sarah sat in her penthouse office, a tumbler of scotch untouched on her desk. Security footage from nearby buildings played on her laptop. Different angles of the same moment. The instant where death had reached for her and been denied by a stranger's hands. She kept rewinding to the split second before impact. The man's face, focused and determined, no hesitation in his movements. "Miss Hamilton?" James hovered in the doorway. "The police report's been filed. The truck's brakes failed. Completely. The company's already reaching out to settle." She waved away his words. Money didn't interest her right now. "What about him?" "Nothing yet. The security team's reviewing more footage. We have a general direction he went with the little girl, but his daughter," Sarah corrected softly, remembering the child's worried voice. She touched her silk blouse, still slightly damp from the rain and their fall. The man's hands had been rough, calloused, working hands. She'd felt them steady her even as they'd tumbled backward. Across the city, Michael sat at his small kitchen table, wincing as Lucy carefully applied antibiotic cream to his scraped palms. The first aid kit, a dollar store purchase that had seen plenty of use, lay open between them. "Does it hurt bad?" Lucy asked, her small face scrunched in concentration. "Nah, just stings a bit." He managed a smile. "Nothing your expert nursing can't fix." Their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Kaplan, knocked on the door as Lucy was finishing up. "I saw the whole thing on the news," she exclaimed, waving her phone. "Channel 4 has the security footage. You're a hero, Michael." His stomach tightened. "It's not a big deal, Mrs. K. Anyone would have—" "Not anyone," she interrupted, showing them the footage. "Look, they're saying the woman you saved is Sarah Hamilton. The Sarah Hamilton." Lucy peered at the screen. "She looked sad, Daddy, and scared. Rich people get scared too, honey." He closed the first aid kit, trying to ignore the way his hands throbbed. Tomorrow would be interesting at work, handling tools with these palms. Back in her office, Sarah dismissed another call from the PR team. They wanted to arrange a press conference, turn this into a human interest story. Tech CEO saved. By Good Samaritan, she could already see the headlines. But something about that felt wrong, felt like taking this raw, genuine moment and turning it into just another corporate narrative. She found herself replaying the moment in her mind. Not the near miss with the truck, but the feeling of those strong arms pulling her to safety, the brief connection with someone who'd acted purely out of instinct, without agenda or expectation. When was the last time anyone had touched her without some ulterior motive? The police say he lives in Queens, James reported, returning with more information. Based on the direction and timing. Stop! Sarah held up her hand. No more tonight. She stood, walking to her window. The city lights blurred below, millions of stories interweaving. Somewhere out there, a man who'd saved her life was probably putting his daughter to bed, not knowing or caring that he'd rescued one of the wealthiest women in New York. In their apartment, Michael tucked Lucy in, her stuffed elephant snug beside her. "Tell me the story again," she yawned, "about how you saved her." "Think you've got that story memorized by now, sweet pea." He smoothed her hair back. "Besides, it's not that exciting. Is too." Her eyes were already closing. "You're like those nights in my books, saving the princess." He waited until her breathing evened out before leaving her room. The dishes still needed washing, and he had to check those permission slip forms. But first, he found himself standing at their small window, looking out at the glittering city. Somewhere out there, a woman he'd saved was probably sitting in some luxury apartment, already forgetting about their brief encounter. It was better that way, he told himself. Their worlds weren't meant to intersect, yet as both Sarah and Michael lay awake that night, in their vastly different beds, in their vastly different homes, neither could quite shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in the universe. Like a key turning in a lock neither of them had known existed, opening a door to possibilities neither was quite ready to face. Finding one man in a city of 8 million shouldn't have been difficult, not with Sarah's resources. Yet 3 days had passed since the accident, and she felt no closer to locating her rescuer. The private investigator's preliminary report lay on her desk, frustratingly thin. Construction worker, approximately mid-30s, she read aloud. Single father, daughter around 8 years old. She'd known all this from their brief encounter. What she needed was a name, an address, something concrete. "Ms. Hamilton?" James appeared with her morning coffee. "The board is asking about tomorrow's merger meeting, and the PR team has drafted 3 different statements about the accident. Tell PR to wait." She took the coffee without looking up. "And send in Mr. Chen." Marcus arrived moments later, raising an eyebrow at the stack of security footage stills spread across her desk. "This isn't about the merger, is it? I need access to every construction site permit filed in Queens in the last 6 months. She met his questioning look with a steady gaze. "And school registration records for girls around 8 years old." "Sarah." Marcus settled into the chair across from her. "Why is this so important? The PR team can spin the accident however you want. We don't need the actual guy." She touched one of the photos. A blurry image of a man in work boots and jeans. A little girl's hand in his. Because he didn't stay for cameras or credit. Because his daughter needed band-aids for his scraped hands while my team was writing press releases. Because, she paused, searching for words. Because I need to know why. Across town, Michael was having his own problems with attention. His co-workers had seen the news footage, and the ribbing was relentless. "Hey, Superman!" Tom called across the site. "Save any billionaires today!" Michael adjusted his work gloves, trying not to wince as they pressed against his healing palms. "Got actual work to do, Tom." But the questions followed him throughout the day. What was she like? Did she offer him a reward? Was she as beautiful in person as on TV? He ignored them all, focusing on his tasks. But his mind kept drifting to that moment. The scent of expensive perfume, the surprising strength in her slight frame as he'd pulled her to safety. In her office, Sarah's investigation was finally bearing fruit. "PS 183, James reported, setting down a new file. "It's the only school in the radius that matches our timeline. They had a student check out early that day, a Lucy Connor." Connor. Sarah tested the name. It felt right somehow. "Father is Michael Connor, 38, former military, Army Corps of Engineers. Currently employed as a site manager for Bradford Construction. James paused. There's more. He's been applying for union positions, better paying jobs. No success yet. Sarah studied the DMV photo included in the file, the same strong features she remembered, but here he was smiling slightly, his eyes kind, a far cry from the polished corporate headshots she was used to reviewing. He's working. Today, James added quietly, the Bradford site on 47th. She stood before she could second-guess herself. Cancel my afternoon. Sarah, Marcus warned from the doorway. The merger meeting can wait. She gathered her coat. Some things are more important. The construction site was a maze of equipment and activity. Sarah felt conspicuously out of place in her designer suit, drawing curious stares from workers. A foreman approached, recognition flickering across his face. Ms. Hamilton, this is unexpected. I'm looking for Michael Connor. The foreman's expression shifted. Mike's up on level 3, but thank you. She moved toward the stairs, James trailing behind with her security team. Up on the 3rd floor, Michael was checking support beam alignments when he heard the murmur of voices, the sudden quiet that meant something unusual was happening. He turned and felt the world tilt slightly. There she was, looking somehow both perfectly at home and completely out of place among the raw concrete and steel. Their eyes met across the space, and for a moment, neither moved. Mr. Connor, she said finally, her voice carrying clearly, despite the construction noise. I believe I owe you a thank you. He was acutely aware of his dusty clothes, the protective gear, the curious stares of his co-workers. No thanks needed, ma'am. Just did what anyone would do, but they didn't. She took a step forward. You did, and you didn't even stay long. Enough for me to buy you a coffee. There was something in her tone, a hint of humor, maybe even vulnerability, that made him really look at her. Beyond the expensive clothes and careful makeup, he saw something familiar. Loneliness, carefully, hidden behind a polished exterior. I'm more of a diner coffee guy anyway, he found himself saying. A smile touched her lips. I know a great diner in Queens. If you're free for lunch. Behind her, James raised an eyebrow. Behind him, his co-workers were barely concealing their interest. But in that moment, Michael was only aware of two things, the hopeful look in Sarah Hamilton's eyes and the strange feeling that his carefully ordered world was about to change completely. The Bell Tower Diner had seen better days, its neon sign flickering intermittently in the afternoon sun. Sarah's security team looked distinctly uncomfortable as they took up positions outside, their dark suits drawing curious glances from regular patrons. Inside, Michael watched Sarah slide into the vinyl booth across from him, her designer blazer a stark contrast to the worn Formica table. She looked different here, away from the construction site. More human somehow, less like a CEO, and more like just a woman. I'm still trying to figure out, she said, accepting a chipped mug of coffee from the waitress, why you ran. Michael stirred sugar into his own coffee. Had to get Lucy home. She had homework. That's it. Sarah studied him over the rim of her mug. Most people would have stayed for the cameras, the attention, the potential rewards. Most people haven't had to explain to an 8-year-old why some things matter more than money. He met her gaze steadily. Lucy's teacher was telling me about art club scholarships right before everything happened. Didn't feel right to profit from doing what any decent person would do. Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Respect, maybe, or understanding. Tell me about her, Lucy. And somehow, despite himself, Michael did. He told Sarah about Lucy's artwork, her passion for dinosaurs, her mismatched socks and endless questions, about reading together before bed, about their morning routines, about the way she saw wonder in everything. She sounds remarkable, Sarah said softly when he paused. Like her father, Michael felt heat rise to his face. Just trying my best. Not always sure it's enough. It is. Her response was immediate, certain. Trust me, I know what it looks like when someone's giving less than their best. I see it every day in the corporate world, people going through motions, doing the minimum. What you're doing, that's something else entirely. The waitress returned, and Sarah found herself ordering a grilled cheese sandwich, something she hadn't eaten in years. Michael got the meatloaf special, and for a while they ate in comfortable silence. "Dad!" A familiar voice broke through the diner's quiet. Lucy stood by their table, still in her school uniform, eyes wide as she recognized Sarah. "You're the lady Dad saved." Michael started to rise. "Lucy, what are you?" "Early dismissal," came Mrs. Kaplan's voice from behind Lucy. "I was bringing her home when we saw you through the window." The elderly neighbor's eyes sparkled with barely concealed delight at the scene before her. Sarah surprised everyone by sliding over in her booth. "Would you like to join us, Lucy? I was just hearing about your amazing artwork." Lucy didn't hesitate, climbing in beside Sarah while Mrs. Kaplan made her excuses with a knowing smile. "Did Dad show you my drawing of him as a superhero?" "Not yet," Sarah replied, and Michael was struck by how natural she seemed with Lucy, no trace of the corporate CEO present. "But I'd love to see it." Lucy pulled her ever-present sketchbook from her backpack, and soon the table was covered with drawings. Sarah listened intently as Lucy explained each one, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite obligation. "And this one," Lucy said, pointing to a particularly detailed piece, "is for the art show, if I can go." Michael felt the familiar tightness in his chest, but before he could speak, Lucy continued, "It's okay if I can't, Dad. I know it's expensive." Sarah looked between them, something unreadable in her expression. "You know," she said carefully, "New Horizons has an educational outreach program. We sponsor arts education in schools across the city." "Ms. Hamilton," Michael started. "Sarah," she corrected. "And this isn't charity, Michael. It's investment in talent. Lucy, would you like to tell me more about your art show?" As Lucy enthusiastically launched into details, Michael watched them together, his daughter and this woman who'd stepped out of her world into his. Sarah caught his eye over Lucy's head, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended their different circumstances. The afternoon light was fading when they finally left the diner, Lucy clutching a napkin on which Sarah had written her personal number. "For art emergencies," she'd said with a wink that made Lucy giggle. "Thank you," Michael said quietly as they stood on the sidewalk. "Not just for, but for treating her like she matters." "She does." "Matter," Sarah replied, her professional mask slipping back into place as her security team approached. "You both do." She hesitated, then added, "I meant what I said about the art program, Michael. It's not charity, it's recognition of potential." As her sleek car pulled away, Lucy tugged at Michael's hand. "I like her, Dad. She's not like on TV. At all." Michael watched the car disappear into traffic, thinking about the way Sarah's eyes had softened when Lucy showed her drawings, the genuine laugh she'd let out at his terrible dad jokes, the moments when the CEO facade had fallen away. "Completely. No, sweet pea," he agreed. "She's not like on TV at all." Sarah stood in her walk-in closet, surrounded by designer labels, feeling oddly uncertain. She'd negotiated billion-dollar deals wearing these power suits, but tonight was different. Tonight wasn't about business. The invitation had been impulsive, offering to cook dinner for Michael and Lucy in her penthouse, but something in her needed to share her world with them the way they'd shared theirs. She finally chose a simple cashmere sweater and slacks, deliberately casual. As she moved through her kitchen, checking the lasagna recipe for the 5th time, James watched with barely concealed amusement. "I could have arranged a chef," he reminded her. "That's not the point." Sarah carefully layered pasta and sauce, remembering how her grandmother had taught her years ago, before boardrooms and business deals had consumed her life. Besides, Lucy mentioned it's her favorite. The doorbell chimed precisely at 7. Sarah smoothed her sweater, feeling strangely nervous as she opened the door. Michael stood there in what was clearly his best shirt, Lucy beside him in a pretty dress, both of them wide-eyed at the penthouse's luxury. "We brought dessert," Lucy announced, holding up a slightly lopsided chocolate cake. "Dad and I made it together. Did you now?" Sarah accepted the cake, noting the flower still under Michael's fingernails, the proud smile he gave his daughter. "That was very thoughtful." "Nice place," Michael said, trying for casual as they entered the living room with its panoramic city views. "Bet the heating bill's reasonable." Sarah laughed, surprising herself with how genuine it felt. "Wait until you see the kitchen, Lucy. Want to help me finish the lasagna?" Lucy bounced forward eagerly, while Michael wandered to the windows, taking in the glittering cityscape. "Pretty different from our view in Queens," he commented. "Sometimes I miss seeing actual streets," Sarah admitted, helping Lucy sprinkle cheese on the lasagna. "Up here, everything looks like a miniature. It's easy to forget there are real people down there, living real lives." "Is that why you came looking for us?" Lucy asked with 8-year-old directness. "Because Dad made you remember?" Sarah's hands stilled on the casserole dish. "You know what? I think maybe he did." The lasagna turned out surprisingly well, though Sarah suspected her guests would have been kind regardless. They sat at her seldom-used dining table, Lucy chattering about school, Michael relaxing enough to share stories from his construction sites. Sarah found herself talking about her own childhood, about the grandmother who'd taught her to cook, about dreams she'd had before spreadsheets and stock options took over. "What happened to her?" Lucy asked, when Sarah mentioned her grandmother's recipes. "Your grandmother? She passed away while I was in college." Sarah twisted her wine glass, remembering. "I was so busy with finals, I almost didn't make it to the funeral. Sometimes I wonder what she'd think of me now." "I think," Michael said quietly, "she'd be proud of what you've built, but maybe happier to see you making her lasagna again." Their eyes met across the table, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest. A wall crumbling, perhaps, or a door opening. After dinner, Lucy discovered Sarah's piano, dusty from disuse. "Do you play?" she asked excitedly. "I used to. Haven't had much time lately." "Dad's teaching me. Show her, Dad." Michael shook his head, but Lucy's pleading wore him down. He sat at the piano, fingers hovering uncertainly over the keys before beginning a simple melody, heart and soul. "My mum taught me," he explained, slightly embarrassed, "before she passed. Lucy's better than I am now. Play with him." Lucy tugged Sarah toward the piano bench. "You take the high part." And somehow, Sarah found herself sitting beside Michael, their shoulders touching as she picked out the harmony. Lucy watched delightedly as they played, occasionally hitting wrong notes and laughing, the formal dinner turning into something warmer, more real. Later, as Lucy dozed on the sofa, Michael and Sarah stood at the windows again, the city a carpet of lights below them. "Thank you," Sarah said softly, "for coming tonight, for letting me." She gestured vaguely at the evening, unable to quite express what she meant. "For letting you be normal," Michael suggested, understanding in his eyes. "We all need that sometimes, even billionaire CEOs. I'm not very good at it," she admitted. "Being normal, she hesitated, being close to people." Could have fooled Lucy. Michael glanced at his sleeping daughter. "She hasn't stopped talking about you since the diner. The mysterious lady who likes her art and makes good lasagna. High praise indeed." Sarah smiled, then sobered. "Michael, about the art program." "I know," he interrupted gently. "It's a real program. I checked, and I filled out the application for Lucy." Sarah's heart lifted. "You did?" "Yeah, well." He shrugged, but his eyes were warm. "Sometimes being a good dad means letting go of pride a bit, accepting help when it's offered with kindness." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah was acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the quiet intimacy of the moment. A small snore from Lucy broke the tension, making them both laugh softly. "I should get her home," Michael said reluctantly. "Of course." Sarah walked them to the door, where Michael carefully lifted his sleeping daughter. "Drive safe." "We'll take a cab," he assured her. Thanks again for dinner. It was normal, she suggested with a smile. Better than normal, he corrected, and something in his voice made her breath catch. After they left, Sarah stood in her quiet penthouse, touching the piano keys where they'd played together. The apartment had always felt appropriately sized before, but now it seemed strangely empty, echoing with the memory of laughter and simple melodies and the taste of homemade chocolate cake. The photo hit social media on a Tuesday morning. Sarah Hamilton and Michael Connor leaving a small Italian restaurant in Queens, Lucy skipping between them. The headline above it read, "Tech CEO's Night in Shining Work Boots. The romance we didn't know we needed." Michael first heard about it when he arrived at the construction site. The usual morning greetings had turned into whispers and knowing looks. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from people he hadn't heard from in years. "Connor," his supervisor called him into the site office. "You didn't mention you were dating Sarah Hamilton." "I'm not," Michael started, then stopped, unsure how to define what was happening between them. 3 dinners, 2 lunch breaks, countless text messages about Lucy's art and daily life. The way Sarah's eyes lit up when she laughed, really laughed, the comfortable silences they'd begun to share. "Look," his supervisor continued, "corporate's interested. They're talking about fast-tracking you for that union position, given your new connections." The suggestion made Michael's stomach turn. "I want that job because I've earned it, not because of who I know." Across town, Sarah was facing her own barrage of questions. The board had called an emergency meeting, ostensibly about quarterly projections, but the agenda quickly derailed. "The stock price is responding positively," Marcus reported, pulling up charts. "The public loves the story, self-made billionaire and working-class hero. It's like a movie." "This isn't a PR campaign," Sarah said sharply. "These are real people's lives." "Exactly why we need to manage this carefully," Richard Walsh interjected. "Your image affects shareholder confidence. Dating a construction worker—" "His name is Michael Connor," Sarah interrupted, her voice cutting through the boardroom. "Former Army Corps of Engineers, and my personal life is not up for committee review." The real impact hit home when Lucy came home from school in tears. Michael found her curled up with Mrs. Kaplan, who'd picked her up early. "The other kids saw the pictures," Mrs. Kaplan explained gently. "Some of them weren't very kind. They said Sarah's only being nice to us because of publicity," Lucy sniffled. "That she doesn't really care about my art. That you're just her charity case." Michael felt something twist in his chest. Pain and anger and protective instinct all mixed together. He pulled Lucy into his arms, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "Hey, sweet pea, look at me." He waited until she met his eyes. "Remember when Sarah came to your art club exhibition last week? When she spent an hour asking about your techniques and colors?" Lucy nodded. "She didn't know anyone was taking pictures then. She came because she wanted to see your work. Because she cares about you." He wiped her tears with his thumb. "The newspapers, the pictures, that's all just noise. What matters is what we know is real." His phone buzzed. Sarah calling. He almost didn't answer, some part of him wanting to protect Lucy from more exposure. But Lucy reached for the phone herself. "Sarah?" Her voice was still wobbly. "Did you see what they're saying about us?" Michael heard Sarah's voice soften through the speaker. "I did, honey. I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. Want to know a secret? When I was your age, kids said mean things about my family, too. We didn't have much money then, and I wore the same clothes too often." "Really?" Lucy's grip on the phone tightened. "But you. I wasn't always. And you know what? Those kids who were mean, they didn't matter in the end. What mattered were the people who saw me for who I really was. Like you see me, Lucy. Not as the CEO, just as Sarah." Michael watched his daughter's face transform, tears giving way to a small smile. Sarah was still talking, something about a special art project they could work on together, but Michael was caught in the realization of how seamlessly she'd become part of their lives, how naturally she knew exactly what Lucy needed to hear. Later that night, after Lucy was asleep, he texted Sarah, "Thank you for being real with her. With us, her response came quickly. Always. The rest of the world can think what they want. We know what's true. He stared at those words for a long time, thinking about truth and perception, about the stories people tell and the reality behind them. Outside his window, the city sparkled with its usual indifference to personal dramas. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably in her penthouse dealing with board members and PR teams, but she'd taken the time to heal an 8-year-old's heart, to remind her what really mattered. Maybe that was the story the newspapers should be telling. Sarah found herself doing something she hadn't done in years, standing in front of her closet, second-guessing her outfit choices. The invitation had come from Michael, surprising her during their daily good morning text exchange. "Lucy's at a sleepover Saturday. Would you like to see a movie? Just us, just us." The words made her stomach flutter in a way that multi-million-dollar deals never did. She finally chose a soft sweater and jeans, clothes that wouldn't draw attention. "That," said Sarah rather than CEO. Her driver raised an eyebrow when she gave him the address of a small theater in Forest Hills, but knew better than to comment. Michael was waiting outside, and something in her chest tightened at the sight of him in a blue button-down shirt, looking both familiar and somehow new without his work clothes, or Lucy between them as a buffer. "You look," he started, then smiled. "Different. Good different. You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, noting how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "So, what are we seeing?" He held up tickets to a revival showing of Casablanca. "Mrs. Kaplan mentioned you'd never seen it. Seemed like something that needed fixing." The theater was nearly empty, just a few other couples scattered in the darkness. Sarah felt Michael's arm brush against hers on their shared armrest, neither of them pulling away. On screen, Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman played out their doomed romance, but Sarah found herself more aware of Michael's presence, of the warmth of him beside her. "You know," he whispered during a quiet moment, "Lucy asked me if this was a date." Sarah's heart skipped. "What did you tell her?" "Told her I'd let you know how it goes." His hand found hers in the dark, fingers intertwining. "Naturally. Any thoughts so far?" She squeezed his hand, words unnecessary. After the movie, neither wanted the evening to end. They found themselves walking through a small park, the autumn air crisp around them. Sarah had forgotten how nice it was to just walk somewhere, to not be rushing between meetings or surrounded by security. "Lucy's art teacher called today," Michael said, as they paused by a fountain. "Said she's flourishing in the program. He hesitated. "I can't thank you enough for that opportunity." "You don't have to thank me." Sarah turned to face him. "Seeing her talent recognized, seeing her grow, that's everything I hoped for when we started the program. Lucy just happens to be the perfect example of why it matters. Still," Michael's voice was soft, "you've changed our lives, Sarah, in ways that have nothing to do with money or connections. Just by being you. You changed mine first," she reminded him. "Not just by saving me from that truck, by showing me what I'd been missing, focused on boardrooms and bottom lines, real connections, family dinners, bad jokes and homework help, and—" She gestured between them. "This, and what is this?" he asked, echoing her earlier question. "Because Lucy's not the only one who's wondering." Sarah looked up at him, at this man who'd crashed into her carefully ordered world and rearranged everything, who treated her wealth as incidental and her heart as precious, who taught his daughter that kindness mattered more than success. "This," she said carefully, "is me realizing that sometimes the best things in life aren't planned. They're just saved for us until we're ready to see them." Michael's hand came up to cup her cheek, his palm warm against the cool night air. "You know this won't be easy. The media, the board, the different worlds we come from. When has anything worth having ever been easy?" She leaned into his touch. "Besides, I have it on good authority that you're pretty good at saving things." His laugh was soft, warm, everything she'd come to associate with him. When he kissed her, It wasn't like the movies. There were no fireworks, no swelling music. Instead, it felt like coming home to a place she hadn't known she was missing, like finding the last piece of a puzzle she hadn't realized was incomplete. They walked back slowly, hands linked, talking about everything and nothing. About Lucy's latest art project, about Sarah's childhood dreams of being a pianist, about the small moments that shape a life. At her car, Michael pulled her close one last time. "So," he murmured against her hair, "should I tell Lucy this was definitely a date?" Sarah smiled against his chest, breathing in the simple, clean scent of him. "Tell her." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "Tell her that sometimes the best stories aren't the ones in movies. They're the ones we write ourselves." As her car pulled away, Sarah touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Her phone buzzed, with work emails, board messages, PR concerns. But for once, the constant demands of her corporate world seemed distant, less important than the memory of his hand in hers, of shared laughter in the dark, of the promise of something real and precious growing between them. The merger documents sat unsigned on Sarah's desk, overshadowed by the Wall Street Journal article that had just hit her inbox. New Horizons Hamilton? Love story or liability? The headline alone made her temples throb. "The board's waiting," James reminded her gently. "They've called an emergency session." She knew what awaited her in the boardroom. The same faces, the same concerns, now amplified by the approaching merger with Jensen Tech, a deal worth billions. That had been in the works for months before a runaway truck changed everything. Richard Walsh was already speaking when she entered. "Can't afford distractions right now. Jensen's people are asking questions about stability, about focus." A CEO dating a construction worker, site manager, Sarah corrected, her voice arctic, former military engineer, "and my personal life isn't up for debate." "It is when it affects shareholder value," Marcus interjected, looking pained. "Sarah, you know I support you, but the timing. This merger could revolutionize our AI development. We can't risk it." Across town, Michael was facing his own professional challenges. The union position he'd been pursuing suddenly came through. Too quickly, too easily. His supervisor's congratulatory handshake felt hollow. "Fast-tracked it myself," the man said proudly. "After all, can't have Sarah Hamilton's boyfriend working entry-level, right?" The word boyfriend hit Michael like a physical blow. Not because it was wrong. What he and Sarah shared had grown into something deep and real, but because of the way it was wielded, turning their relationship into a corporate networking tool. He found himself in the small park where they'd shared their first kiss, calling Sarah during his lunch break. Her voice was tight when she answered, the sound of boardroom murmurs in the background. "Can you talk?" he asked. "Give me a minute." He heard her footsteps, a door closing. "Sorry. It's been intense here." "Same." He watched a group of kids, and playing nearby, thinking of Lucy. "They offered me the union job." "Michael, that's wonderful." "Because of you," he interrupted gently. "Not because of my qualifications or experience, because dating you makes me valuable to them." The silence between them was heavy with understanding. "The board wants me to cool things off until after the merger," Sarah finally said. "Jensen Tech is nervous about anything that might destabilize leadership, and I qualify as destabilizing." He tried to keep his tone light, but the hurt crept in. "You qualify as the best thing that's happened to me in years." Her voice softened. "Which terrifies them because it means I'm not just their machine anymore. I'm human. I have priorities beyond profit margins." "Sarah!" "No, listen." She took a breath. "I've spent 15 years building this company, sacrificed everything for it, relationships, family, any semblance of a normal life. And it's given me success, power, influence. But these past few months with you and Lucy, you've given me joy." Michael closed his eyes, remembering Lucy's delight when Sarah helped with her science project last weekend, the way Sarah's professional mask had cracked completely as they built a baking soda volcano on her expensive dining table. The job, he said slowly. I can't take it. Not like this. I need to earn things on my own merit. I know. Her smile was audible. It's one of the things I love about you. The word hung between them, unplanned but not unwelcome. Neither had said it before, though it had been growing quietly in the spaces between text messages and shared meals and Lucy's bedtime stories. The merger, he started. Can wait, she finished firmly. I've got a counter-proposal for the board. The ethics initiative we launched, it's been incredibly successful. Public response is overwhelming. And it happened because meeting you and Lucy reminded me why I started this company. To make technology serve people, not the other way around. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe what they see as a liability is actually our greatest asset. Real human connection, genuine relationships, the ability to see beyond spreadsheets to the lives we're affecting. She paused. Would you and Lucy be willing to come to the Jensen meeting? Not as my boyfriend or a networking opportunity, but as the people who reminded me what really matters. Michael thought about the union job, about the easy path versus the right one, about teaching Lucy the value of earning her way versus taking shortcuts. You know this won't solve everything, he said. There will always be people who see us as too different, who think we don't make sense together. Good thing I didn't fall in love with you because we make sense on paper. The word came easier this time, more natural. I fell in love with you because you make me better. Because you and Lucy remind me who I am beyond the CEO title. Michael smiled, feeling the tension ease from his shoulders. So we're doing this. Fighting for us. We're doing this, Sarah confirmed. After all, you've already saved me once. Seems only fair I get to save us both this time. Around him, the city hummed with its usual energy, indifferent to personal dramas and corporate politics. But in this moment, Michael felt the shift of something aligning, not just in their relationship, but in the larger story they were writing together. The streamers were slightly crooked, and the birthday banner had a tiny tear where Michael had struggled with the tape. But to Lucy, her 9th birthday party was perfect. Sarah had insisted on hosting it in their apartment rather than her penthouse. It's her home, Michael. That matters. And now their small living room was filled with the controlled chaos of excited third-graders. Sarah moved through the space with surprising ease, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a t-shirt that matched the party's art theme. She helped supervise the crafting station where kids were creating their own comic books, somehow managing to keep paint off the furniture while making each child feel like their artistic vision was revolutionary. She's good with them, Mrs. Kaplan observed, helping Michael arrange cupcakes. Natural. Michael watched as Sarah demonstrated a watercolor technique, her laugh mixing with the children's. Yeah, she is. The doorbell rang, and Michael's chest tightened as he opened it. Amanda, his ex-wife, stood there with a wrapped present and a carefully neutral expression. Sorry I'm late, she said, stepping inside. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the decorations, the activities, and finally landing on Sarah. So, this is her? Amanda, Michael started, but Lucy had already spotted her mother. Mom! She ran over, paint-stained hands carefully held away from her party dress, a gift from Sarah that matched the art supplies she'd received. You came! Come see what Sarah taught me about shading. Amanda allowed herself to be pulled toward the craft table, where Sarah straightened, something flickering behind her professional smile. You must be Amanda. Lucy's told me so much about you. The two women regarded each other, years of Lucy's life stretching between them. Amanda, who'd left when the responsibility of parenthood proved too heavy. Sarah, who'd stepped into their lives and embraced not just Michael, but his daughter. With open arms. Has she? Amanda's voice was cool. She's certainly told me about you, the billionaire CEO who saved my daughter's art career. Mom, Lucy protested, sensing the tension. Sarah didn't just help with art. She helps with math, too. And she makes the best lasagna, just like her grandmother taught her. Something shifted in Amanda's expression. Surprise, perhaps, at hearing domestic details about the woman she'd probably only read about in newspapers. Sarah knelt to Lucy's level. "Honey, why don't you show your mom the comic book you're working on? The one about the brave knight and his daughter?" As Lucy led her mother to her creation, Michael touched Sarah's arm. "You okay?" She leaned into him slightly. "Shouldn't I be asking you that?" Before he could answer, Lucy's voice rang out. "Can we do cake now? Please?" The cake was another joint creation. Sarah's baking precision combined with Michael and Lucy's. Enthusiastic if messy decorating. 9 candles flickered as they sang, Lucy's face glowing with more than just candlelight. "Make a wish, sweet pea," Michael said. Lucy closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and blew. Then, to everyone's surprise, she burst into tears. The adults froze, but Sarah moved first, reaching Lucy before either of her parents. "Hey, what's wrong? We can relight the candles if you want another wish." Lucy shook her head, tears still falling. "I didn't need another wish. This one's already coming true." She looked between her father and Sarah, then at her mother. "I wished for a real family, not just pieces of one." The room went quiet, even the other children sensing the weight of the moment. Amanda's face softened, real pain flickering across it. "Oh, honey," she said softly, "you've always had a real family. Sometimes families just look different than we expect. Like how Sarah's not trying to be my mom," Lucy sniffled. "But she loves me anyway?" Sarah's breath caught. She met Amanda's eyes over Lucy's head, seeing understanding dawn there. "Exactly like that," Amanda agreed. "And how I'll always be your mom, even if I'm not here every day." Michael watched the 3 women in his daughter's life, her mother, who was learning to be present in the ways she could, Sarah, who loved without trying to replace, and Lucy herself, wise beyond her years, making room in her heart for all of them. Later, after the party wound down, and Amanda left with a more genuine smile, Lucy fell asleep on the couch, surrounded by art supplies and wrapping paper. Sarah helped Michael clean up, moving around each other with the ease of practice. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything today, for understanding about Amanda, for loving Lucy the way you do." Sarah looked at the sleeping child, at the life they were building together. "You know, I always thought family was something you were born into, but maybe it's something you build, one birthday party and messy art project at a time." Michael pulled her close, breathing in the scent of birthday cake and paint and home. "Speaking of building things, Lucy's comic book? The brave knight had a princess too, one who chose to stay." Sarah smiled against his chest. "Smart kid you've got there." "Smart family," he corrected. "All the pieces included." The tabloid headline screamed across every newsstand in the city. "Hamilton's hero, the dark truth behind the fairy tale." Below it, grainy photos from Michael's military service in Afghanistan, followed by court documents from his divorce. Sarah's hand shook as she read the article, each word calculated to destroy. Sources close to the couple reveal Connor's history of PTSD, custody battle, financial struggles, seeking advancement through connection to Hamilton fortune. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. James had already blocked 3 major networks and countless reporters, but it was the message from Michael that gutted her. Lucy's school. "Called. The press is there. I can't get through to pick her up." "Get my car," she ordered James, already moving, "and call our legal team. I want to know who leaked those sealed records." The scene at Lucy's school was chaos. Photographers crowded. The entrance held back only by security guards. Sarah's driver had to circle twice before finding a back entrance. She found Michael there, his face tight with barely controlled anger. "They're vultures," he spat, "using my service record, my divorce, even Lucy, to sell papers." "Mr. Connor," a school administrator approached cautiously. "We've moved Lucy to the counselor's office. Some of the children—" There were comments made. Sarah felt Michael stiffen beside her. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "This is exactly what I didn't want," he said quietly. "Lucy exposed to this circus, my past dragged out for entertainment." "Michael!" Did you know they'd do this? His voice was controlled, but she heard the pain beneath it. Your PR team, your board, did they warn you they'd dig into my life? Of course not. She stepped closer. Michael, I would never. Ms. Hamilton. James appeared, looking apologetic. Jensen Tech is threatening to pull out of the merger. The board is demanding an emergency meeting. Michael's laugh was hollow. Go! Handle your billion-dollar deal. I need to get my daughter out of here. Let me help. You've helped enough. He immediately regretted the words, seeing the hurt flash across her face. Sarah, I'm sorry. I need to protect Lucy right now. Inside the counselor's office, Lucy sat small and quiet, nothing like her usual vibrant self. She looked up as they entered, her eyes red-rimmed. Tommy said his dad saw on TV that you're dangerous, she whispered to Michael, because of the war. And that Sarah's only with us for publicity, is that true? Sarah felt something break inside her chest. She started to speak, but Michael moved first, kneeling before his daughter. Lucy, look at me, the war. Yes, it changed me. Sometimes it still makes me sad or angry, but I got help. I learned to be okay again. And you know why? He waited until Lucy met his eyes. Because of you. Because being your dad matters more than anything that happened before. And Sarah. Lucy's voice wavered. Sarah knelt beside them, not touching, but close. Lucy, honey, do you remember when you showed me your first comic book? The one about the lonely princess in her tower? Lucy nodded. That's who I was before I met you and your dad. All my money, my company. It was just a tower I'd built around myself, but your dad, he didn't see the tower. He just saw me. And you showed me what really matters isn't stock prices or media stories. It's painting together and messy kitchen experiments and reading bedtime stories. But the newspapers are written by people who don't know us, Sarah finished firmly. They don't know how your dad makes terrible dad jokes just to make me laugh. They don't know how proud I am of your art or how much I love our Sunday pancake competitions. Michael's hand found hers, squeezing gently. I'm sorry, he murmured, for doubting, for pulling away. Mr. Connor? James appeared in the doorway. There's something you should see. He held up his tablet, showing a live stream from New Horizons' main lobby. Sarah's entire executive team stood before a wall of reporters. Marcus Chen was speaking, proud to confirm that Sarah Hamilton's leadership has never been stronger. Her ethics initiative, inspired by her relationship with Michael Connor, has increased our market value by 30%. As for Mr. Connor's military service, we at New Horizons consider it an honor to be connected to an American hero who sacrificed for his country. Turn it off, Michael said roughly. Sarah stood. No, wait, Marcus didn't do this for publicity. He did it because it's true. She faced Michael and Lucy. The board wanted me to distance myself from you. Marcus just risked his position to support us instead. Lucy tugged at Michael's sleeve. Dad, can we go home now, all of us? Michael looked between his daughter and Sarah, seeing past the media circus to what mattered, this small family they'd built, strong enough to weather storms. Yeah, sweet pea. He pulled them both close. Let's go home together. Outside, cameras flashed and reporters called questions. But wrapped in each other's strength, they walked through the chaos untouched, their truth stronger than any headline could ever be. Sarah's penthouse felt cavernous in the silence. 2 weeks had passed since the media explosion, since Michael had asked for space to protect Lucy, to let things settle. Her phone showed a draft message she'd written and deleted a dozen times. I miss our Sunday pancakes. Instead, she channeled her energy into work, into proving that love hadn't made her weak, it had made her stronger. The ethics initiative was expanding, drawing support from unexpected quarters. Other tech companies were following their lead, recognizing that humanity in leadership wasn't a liability. But at night, alone in her pristine kitchen, she found herself looking at the chocolate smudges Lucy had left on her cookbook, at the slightly crooked refrigerator art that neither she nor her housekeeper had the heart to straighten. In Queens, Michael wasn't faring much better. He'd moved Lucy to a different school, Smaller, private, with better security. The union job had come through properly this time, based on his merits rather than his connections. Everything should have felt like progress, but Lucy's new art hung listless on the walls, missing the enthusiasm Sarah's encouragement had inspired. She didn't ask for help with math anymore, though Michael knew she struggled. One night, he found her reading alone, the space beside her on the bed conspicuously empty where Sarah used to sit during story time. "Dad?" Lucy's voice was small in the darkness. "Did we break up with Sarah because of me, because of what the kids at school said?" Michael sat heavily on her bed. "No, sweet pea, sometimes grown-ups need to figure things out. Sure, we're doing what's best for everyone, but who decides what's best?" Lucy clutched her stuffed elephant, a gift from Sarah, tighter. "Because this doesn't feel best at all." His phone buzzed, another message from his PTSD support group leader. He'd started attending meetings again, not because the old shadows were returning, but because he needed to remember who he was beyond the headlines. "Your father's service record," the group leader had said, "it's not a shame to hide. It's part of who you are, like Sarah's success is part of her. The question is, are you letting fear of exposure control your future?" Across town, Sarah sat in a coffee shop, not their usual diner, but a small place where she could be anonymous. A young mother struggled with a stroller nearby, and Sarah automatically stood to help, remembering how she'd learned to navigate narrow spaces with Lucy's art supplies. "Thank you," the mother sighed. "Sometimes it feels impossible doing everything alone." Sarah smiled, the words hitting home. "Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let people help us." That evening, she found herself in front of her piano, playing the simple melody Michael had taught her. Heart and soul drifted through the empty apartment, and she remembered Lucy's delighted face when they'd played together, Michael's warm presence beside her on the bench. Her phone lit up with a text from Marcus. "Board meeting tomorrow. Jensen Tech wants to move forward. They say your handling of the media crisis showed genuine leadership." She stared at the message, understanding slowly dawning. All this time she'd thought showing humanity would make her seem weak. Instead, it had made her company more relatable, more trustworthy. The ethics initiative wasn't succeeding despite her relationship with Michael and Lucy. It was succeeding because of it. In Queens, Michael stood at his window looking toward Manhattan. Lucy's latest art project lay unfinished on the table. A family portrait with a conspicuous blank space where she'd started to draw Sarah. His phone showed Sarah's contact photo, the three of them at Lucy's birthday, faces smeared with cake frosting, laughing. His thumb hovered over the delete button, part of his getting space plan. Instead, he found himself opening their last text exchange. The messages sat there, unsent thoughts spanning 2 weeks of silence. Lucy got an A on her math test. She used the tricks you taught her. "The diner's not the same without you." "I understand now. You never tried to fix us. You just loved us as we were." In her penthouse, Sarah's fingers stilled on the piano keys. She picked up her phone, finally letting herself type the words she'd been holding back. "I'm not good at being normal. But with you and Lucy, I never had to be. You let me be myself, CEO and bedtime story reader, businesswoman and terrible pancake flipper. I miss that. I miss us." In 2 different parts of the city, 2 people who had found family in unexpected places stared at unsent messages, both learning that sometimes the bravest thing isn't walking away to protect those you love. It's walking back to them, scars and headlines and all. The letter arrived at Sarah's office in a slightly crumpled envelope, Lucy's careful handwriting instantly recognizable. Inside, she found a single sheet of paper, decorated with watercolors in the technique Sarah had taught her months ago. "Dear Sarah, Dad says sometimes we need space to figure things out, but I think maybe grown-ups make things too complicated. Here's what I know. Dad smiles less now. You taught me that art tells stories, and my stories feel incomplete without you yesterday. Dad made pancakes and they were awful. Don't tell him I said that. Sometimes at night I hear him playing Heart and Soul on my keyboard. The newspapers were mean, but you and Dad taught me that truth is more important than what people say. So here's my truth. I miss you. We miss you. Love, Lucy P.S. Did you know Dad keeps your picture in his wallet? He thinks I don't know. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, feeling tears threaten. Through her office window, she could see the spot where Michael had first pulled her from the truck's path. Such a simple act of courage. Why had they let fear make them forget that courage now? Across town, Michael sat in his PTSD support group, finally finding the words he'd been struggling with. I thought I was protecting them, he admitted to the circle of understanding faces. From the media, from my past, from the complications of our different worlds. But maybe I was just protecting myself from being vulnerable, from letting someone see all of me, the soldier, the father, the man still figuring things out. His group leader nodded. And what did you learn about vulnerability during your service? Michael thought about his unit, about the trust that kept them alive, that it's not weakness, that sometimes showing your scars means showing your strength. He returned home to find Lucy at the kitchen table, surrounded by art supplies, working on something she quickly tried to hide. It's okay, sweet pea, he said softly. I know you wrote to Sarah. Lucy's lower lip trembled. Are you mad? No. He sat beside her looking at the family portrait she'd been working on, the one with the space for Sarah no longer blank. I think you're braver than I am. She makes us better, Dad, Lucy said with simple certainty. Not because she's rich or famous, because she loves us, the real us. In her penthouse, Sarah stood before her board of directors, Lucy's letter burning in her pocket like a talisman. The Jensen merger is secure, she announced. Not because we distanced ourselves from controversy, but because we faced it with authenticity. Our stock prices are up, public trust is at an all-time high, and the ethics initiative has become an industry standard. She took a deep breath. But more importantly, I've learned something about leadership. It's not about being untouchable. It's about being human enough to connect, brave enough to be vulnerable, and strong enough to love without fear of what others might say. Richard Walsh shifted uncomfortably. Sarah, while your personal growth is admirable, it's not personal growth, she interrupted. It's revolutionary corporate philosophy. We've been running companies like machines, forgetting they're made of people, real people, with real lives and real hearts. She looked around the table, meeting each eye. I'm not asking permission to love Michael Connor. I'm telling you that loving him and his daughter has made me a better CEO, because they remind me why we do this, not for profit margins, but for the lives we can impact. That evening, Michael stood in the small park where they'd shared their first kiss. Lucy's hand was warm in his, her letter to Sarah carefully folded in his pocket. She'd shown it to him before sending it, proud of her honesty. Dad, Lucy pointed toward the park entrance. Look. Sarah stood there, silhouetted against the setting sun. She looked different somehow, softer, but also stronger, more real. They moved toward each other slowly, the space between them heavy with unsaid words. Lucy broke first, running to wrap her arms around Sarah's waist. You got my letter? Sarah knelt, holding Lucy close. I did. And you're right. Grown-ups do make things too complicated sometimes. She looked up at Michael, seeing in his eyes the same understanding that had been growing in her heart, that love isn't about protecting people from your truth, but about trusting them with it. I miss your awful pancakes, she said softly. Michael laughed, the sound breaking the last of the tension. I miss your perfect ones. I miss us, Lucy declared, still wrapped in Sarah's embrace. All of us. The setting sun painted the park in shades of gold, three shadows merging into one as Michael pulled them both close. Around them, the city hummed with its usual energy, indifferent to their small moment of healing. But in that quiet space, something broken began to mend. Not into what it had been before, but into something stronger, tested by fire and found unbreakable. The bench where they sat was the same one where they'd shared their first kiss, but they were different now, tempered by challenges, stronger in their certainty. Lucy had fallen asleep between them, her head on Sarah's lap, feet across Michael's, knees, as if determined even in sleep to keep them connected. "I went back to my support group," Michael said quietly, watching the last rays of sunset paint the sky. "Not because things got bad, but because I needed to remember something." Sarah's fingers gently stroked Lucy's hair, a gesture so natural it made his heart ache. What was that? That healing isn't linear, that every step forward might come with a step back, but that doesn't make the journey less worth taking. He turned to face her. "I pushed you away because I thought I was protecting Lucy, protecting you, but I was really just falling back into old patterns, trying to handle everything alone. And I let you," Sarah admitted, "because part of me still believed I didn't deserve this, that somehow my success, my position, made me unworthy of real connection." She smiled softly. Lucy's letter. She saw right through all our adult complications, didn't she? "She gets that from her mother," Michael said, then paused, surprised by his own ease in mentioning Amanda, the ability to cut through pretense. "But she learned something else from you, Sarah, something I'm only just understanding myself." "What's that?" "That love isn't about being perfect. It's about being real." He touched Lucy's worn sneaker, then Sarah's elegant hand where it rested. On his daughter's hair. These past weeks, everything looked right on paper. Lucy's new school, my promotion, your company's success. But nothing felt right. Because what makes things right isn't circumstances, it's connection. Sarah's free hand found his. "I told the board today that loving you and Lucy has made me a better CEO. Not because it looks good in the press, but because it reminds me why success matters. To make life better for real people, real families." Lucy stirred slightly, murmuring something about pancakes in her sleep. They both smiled, the simple domestic reference holding more meaning now. "I kept your picture," Michael confessed, "in my wallet." Lucy noticed. She notices everything. "I kept Lucy's art on my fridge. My housekeeper tried to straighten it once and I nearly fired her." Sarah's laugh was soft, remembering. "I kept the chocolate smudges in my cookbook too, and every morning I'd look at your empty coffee mug in my cupboard and think about textures." Textures? How your hands feel when you're teaching Lucy piano. The way her hair smells after a bath. The sound of both of you laughing in my kitchen. All these little sensory memories that make a life real. She squeezed his hand. "I have everything anyone could want, but without those textures, it's just empty space." A cool breeze rustled the trees, and Lucy snuggled closer in her sleep. Michael shrugged off his jacket, laying it over her. "Move in with me," Sarah said suddenly. Michael blinked. "What?" "Not to the penthouse, unless you want to, but somewhere new, somewhere that's ours, with space for Lucy's art and your awful pancakes and my attempts at being normal." She turned to face him fully. "I'm not afraid anymore, Michael, of the press, of the board, of being vulnerable. I'm only afraid of missing more moments like this." He studied her face in the gathering dusk. This powerful woman who'd learned to be soft without losing her strength, who loved his daughter with such natural grace, who'd seen past his defenses to the man he really was. "The media will have a field day," he warned, but his smile gave him away. "Let them. We'll be too busy building a life to notice." She glanced down at Lucy. "Besides, I think someone's been planning this longer than we have." Michael followed, her gaze to Lucy's sketchbook, fallen open beside them. The latest drawing showed their family portrait again, but this time with a new addition, a house, clearly drawn with both childish hope and artistic care, with all three of them standing. In front, "She's already designed our home," Sarah said softly, "complete with an art studio and a kitchen big enough for pancake competitions. And a piano. Of course a piano." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "For more heart and soul duets." Lucy. shifted again, blinking awake. She looked between them at their joined hands and smiled sleepily. "Are we a family again?" Michael gathered her close, making room for Sarah in their embrace. "We never stopped being one, sweet pea. We just needed a brave little artist to remind us." Around them, the park had grown quiet, the city's chaos muted to a distant hum. The bench where they sat was just a bench, unremarkable to passers-by. But to them, it was a turning point, a place where fear finally gave way to faith, where three hearts decided that love was worth any headline, any challenge, any change. It was, they would later agree, the real beginning of their story. The house they chose sat halfway between their old lives, not quite Queens, not quite Manhattan. A brownstone with good bones and better memories waiting to be made. Sarah stood in the empty living room, watching Michael and Lucy explore every corner with the kind of wonder that made her see the space through new eyes. "Look at these windows!" Lucy pressed her hands against the glass. "Perfect lighting for painting." She'd already claimed the small sunroom as her future studio, her artistic mind transforming the empty space into possibilities. "And the kitchen actually fits more than two people," Michael added, his arms sliding naturally around Sarah's waist. "No more bumping elbows during pancake competitions." Sarah leaned into him, remembering the realtor's face when they'd made their priorities clear: space for art, room for family dinners, a place for a piano. Not the usual requests from a tech CEO, but then nothing about them had ever been usual. The moving days blended together, Sarah's minimalist furniture looking somehow right next to Michael's worn leather armchair, Lucy's art supplies finding homes in unexpected corners. They hired professionals for the heavy lifting, but some things they insisted on doing themselves. "This goes here," Lucy declared, carefully placing Sarah's grandmother's lasagna recipe on the cookbook stand. "So we can see it every day." Sarah watched Michael hang Lucy's framed artwork alongside her own carefully curated pieces, creating a gallery that told their story better than any magazine profile ever had. The formal dining room transformed into a hybrid space, one end for business dinners, the other for homework sessions and craft projects. The piano arrived last, taking pride of place in the living room. Lucy immediately sat down, patting the bench on either side of her. "Come on," she insisted, "we need to make it feel at home." And so their first night in the new house was christened with a slightly out-of-tune rendition of Heart and Soul, their laughter echoing off walls that had yet to learn their voices. The media caught wind of their move, of course. But something had shifted in the narrative. Perhaps it was the way Sarah handled the Jensen merger, proving that personal happiness and professional success weren't mutually exclusive. Or maybe it was Michael's openness about his military service, now volunteering with veteran support groups. The headlines turned from scandalous to supportive. Tech's new normal. Hamilton Connor family redefines success. Their first dinner party wasn't the formal affair Sarah's board might have expected. Instead, they invited Mrs. Kaplan, who brought her famous rugelach and enough stories about Michael's early parenting days to keep everyone entertained. Amanda came too, more comfortable now in her role as the mother who visited rather than stayed, bringing art supplies for Lucy's studio. Even Marcus showed up, surprising everyone by bonding with Michael over their shared love of classic jazz. Sarah found them in the living room after dinner, Michael teaching her CFO the basic chords to Autumn Leaves, while Lucy offered enthusiastic, if not entirely accurate, criticism. "You know," Marcus said later, helping to clear dishes despite Sarah's protests, "the board was wrong about him, about all of this. The company's never been stronger, and neither have you." Sarah watched Michael teach Lucy how to properly load the dishwasher, a skill she herself was still mastering. "I think that's because I finally understood something. Strength isn't about being untouchable, it's about choosing what to hold on to." The night of Lucy's first art show at her new school, their worlds merged completely. Sarah's executive team sat alongside Michael's construction crew. Amanda chatted with Mrs. Kaplan, and Lucy proudly showed off her latest works to anyone who would listen. Her centerpiece was a triptych, 3 panels showing their journey. The first depicted the moment of rescue, painted from imagination and story. The second showed their separation, figures standing apart but connected by invisible threads. The third panel, the largest, showed their new home, filled with light and color and life. "She's talented," Amanda said softly, standing beside Sarah, "and happy. Thank you for that." "I should be thanking you," Sarah replied, "for trusting me with them." Michael found them later as Lucy was explaining her artistic process to an impressed gallery owner Sarah might or might not have invited. "Look at her," he said proudly, "completely in her element." Sarah took his hand, wedding ring still new enough to make her smile at its touch. "Look at us all." The gallery lights caught the gold of their rings, the silver threading through Michael's temples, the bright colors of Lucy's art. Outside, the city continued its eternal rhythm, but in here, they had created their own world. One, where love bridged all gaps, where family meant more than blood, where happiness wasn't about what you had, but who you chose to share it with. "Dad, Sarah," Lucy called, "come explain about the truck, the part where you saved each other." They moved together toward their daughter, neither of them bothering to correct her version of events. After all, she was right. They had saved each other in all the ways that mattered, and they would continue to do so, one day, one moment, one shared joy at a time. 1 year later, the autumn light streamed through the sunroom windows, catching the edges of Lucy's latest artwork, a piece commissioned by New Horizons for their new ethics initiative wing. At 10 years old, she'd become something of a celebrity in the tech world's art scene. Though she remained remarkably unfazed by the attention. "It's about connection," she explained to the documentary crew filming her process. "How technology should bring people together, not keep them apart." She glanced at Sarah, who stood in the doorway watching proudly. "Like how a billionaire and a construction worker can become a family," the interviewer smiled. "You make it sound simple." "That's because grown-ups complicated everything," Lucy replied with the wisdom of someone who'd watched love conquer headlines. "The simple truth is, they saved each other. The rest is just details." Later that evening, their home filled with the now familiar mixture of voices. Mrs. Kaplan arguing cooking techniques with Michael's veteran support group friends, Amanda showing Marcus her latest photography portfolio, Sarah's executive team helping Lucy set up for her presentation. "Still can't believe you're letting a 10-year-old redesign your corporate logo," Michael teased, sliding his arms around Sarah's waist as they watched from the kitchen doorway. "Says the man who let her redesign his entire construction company's branding," Sarah countered, leaning back against him. "Besides, she understands better than any marketing team what we're trying to build." The proof hung on their walls. Lucy's, art chronicling their journey from that first moment of rescue to their wedding day, each piece capturing not just images, but feelings. The latest edition showed their family at the Veterans Center, where Michael now spent weekends counseling others. Sarah beside him sharing stories about corporate stress and the importance of human connection. Their marriage had changed them, both in unexpected ways. Michael had discovered a talent for corporate outreach, his natural ability to connect with people breaking down barriers in Sarah's business world. Sarah, in turn, had learned to measure success not in stock prices, but in moments. Lucy's excited calls from school, Michael's quiet pride in his expanding veteran program, family dinners where work talk mixed easily with homework discussions and plans for their next pancake championship. "Mom, Dad," Lucy's voice carried from the living room. "It's time!" They joined the gathering crowd as Lucy unveiled her design. The new logo incorporated elements of their story: a reaching hand, a rising sun, the bridge between two worlds. But it was the tagline that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Technology with humanity, because every connection matters. "I interviewed everyone," Lucy explained to the appreciative audience. Sarah's board members, Dad's construction team, the veterans, even the kids at my school, they all said the same thing, that watching our family come together made them believe in something bigger than success or status. Michael squeezed Sarah's hand as their daughter continued her presentation with professional poise. Remember when we thought we needed to protect her from all this? Sarah smiled, remembering their fears, their brief separation, their journey to understanding. Turns out she was protecting us all along, protecting what mattered. The evening wound down slowly, guests reluctant to leave the warm atmosphere of their home. Finally, it was just the three of them, sharing their nightly ritual of hot chocolate and conversation. "Did I do okay?" Lucy asked, chocolate mustache betraying her attempt at sophistication. "You did amazing, sweet pea," Michael assured her. "You always do." Sarah watched them, her CEO mind finally quiet, her heart full. The media still followed their story, but now they told a different tale. How a moment of crisis had transformed into a lifetime of purpose. How a fairy tale had become something better, something real. "What are you thinking?" Michael asked softly. Sarah looked around their home, at Lucy's art supplies scattered across priceless furniture, at Michael's work boots next to her designer heels, at the piano where they still played heart and soul. "On quiet evenings, I'm thinking about texture," she said, "about how the best lives aren't the ones that look perfect from the outside. They're the ones that feel right on the inside." Lucy, half asleep between them, mumbled, "Like our pancakes." They laughed softly, understanding her meaning. Life, like their Sunday breakfast competitions, wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, making messes, learning together, and finding joy in the simple act of being family. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of where they'd started. But here, in the warm circle of their living room, they had everything they needed. Not a fairy tale ending, but something far better, a real one, with all its beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect textures.